Riverside.
Welcome to Dance Talk with Joanne Carey, where the dance world connects, the conversations inspire, and where we are keeping them real. I'm your host, Joanne Carey, and today I am joined with principal dancer Skylar Brandt from American Ballet Theatre. I'm so excited to have her here with me today. I have been following Sky on Instagram for a few years now. I feel like I know her, and I've seen her a few times backstage after her performances, and we were trying to connect to do the podcast. So I'm so happy she's able to join me here today. Thank you, Sky, for joining me on Dance Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just have to say that, when I first started following you on Instagram, I was new to the whole Instagram scene. I was just in a huge transition myself. I was coming out of dance studio ownership. I owned a dance studio for 23 years. I had jumped onto Instagram during the pandemic, and I started following, obviously the ballet world, because that was, what I was doing during the pandemic. And then I started seeing everybody when they were going back to live performance. And that's when I started seeing your posts and your excitement and everything that you were posting about getting back to live performance. And I was like so taken in and excited about who you were and who you are. And thus I just began like following you. And I'm just so happy that we're finally able to talk about all things dance and whatever else comes up. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just want to start at the beginning for the listeners. I know you've been dancing since you were little. I love that little post you'll put up when you were at the bar or when you were explaining, you were telling people about how to do a good arabesque and things like that. But can you just start at the beginning and just tell everybody how you got into dance and ballet and how you grew up through the dance world?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as happened with a lot of kids with older siblings, my sisters were dancing, and so I was being taken to the studio a lot. And my mom said that we were at the studio so often that I at one point asked her if we lived there, which is kind of funny. But I really kind of fell in love with ballet when I started seeing performances at the Metropolitan Opera House, specifically of ABT. And I was seeing on stage the things that I was doing at home, which was playing dress up, listening to music, doing my own interpretive dance. And, the fact that I could see other people being princesses and fairies, but also supported by an entire cast with sets and live orchestra. It was like there was a whole support there for people to use their imaginations. And so that really intrigued me. And so I started ballet probably around like 5-6 years old. And, it was sort of like creative movement. And I think I felt really bored learning the positions of the feet and, skipping and jump. Like I was always the one kind of making funny faces at the bar and being maybe distracting. But then it wasn't until I met my first teachers, Diana White, Christian Claessens, and Valentina Kozlova at Scarsdale Ballet Studio, which is where I'm from, that I really fell in love with it, because the way that they ran their studio was such that I felt like it was a really serious working environment. All of the kids were there to really improve. It was just more challenging. It was more intense. And as a kid who really enjoyed challenges, I really loved that. So it hooked me. At 8 years old, I was like, I'm going to be a principal dancer with ABT. And
wow.
yeah. And my parents were a bit taken aback by it because, they're like, most people don't know what they want to do when they graduate college. So how's it that my 8-year-old knows what her career path is already? And they spoke to my teachers and they said, no, it's possible. Like if you support her and if she works really hard, this is something that you can do. And as a young person, you need to, typically, I guess, start on that journey being a child. So what I will say is that my parents put me into all other kinds of activities before they let me pursue dance full time. They said, okay, you want to be a ballerina? Well, you're going to take soccer and tennis and piano and voice. And, and they tried to expose me to everything else that was out there. And I figured out pretty much an excuse as to how to get out of all of it. Because I was like, I really just want to dance. And so they believed me and they supported me.
That's great. I love hearing that, because those are so many of the similar stories I would hear with my own students too. As a teacher, I would see something in a child. People would always ask me, do you ever see a child in front of you who you think could be, could take this career all the way, or could become a dancer, or whatever, whether it was ballet or jazz or musical theater. And the answer is always yes. You do see that. And there's other times where, somebody might be the dark horse, or you don't necessarily see it right away, and then they blossom into that. But when you have a child who knows what they want to do, that's just icing on the cake as a teacher. It really is, because then it makes your job so much more easier and directed. That child wants that, and the family's on board for it too. So you support that. But kudos to your parents. I love to hear. I mean, it's always it's always the parents. They're so supportive. The support system for dancers is so important, and to have, your parents on board and your family on board. So thank them for,
yeah, truly.
it's really so important. And, and you said you were the youngest of your siblings, correct? Yeah. Is that what
Yes.
you said? Yes.
Yes, the youngest.
And go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I was going to say that my oldest sister, she hated every ballet class she ever took. She often was playing hooky from ballet class, but she ended up going on to become a Nick City dancer. So she reached kind of the pinnacle of the hip hop career, an incredible dancer. And then my middle sister, who was unbelievably talented and gifted, she also enjoyed sports and photography. So she, her interest, she was just like such a well-rounded kid that she didn't pursue it professionally, but she certainly could have. And so yeah, I think that influence, like, we were always dancing around the house as kids. I was just the classical one.
Yes. And that's great. And your sister, she's still the photographer? Like, she does your photos and, right?
Yes,
a lot of your photos, I
exactly.
should say, which is so great. That must be great for you guys to have that.
It's amazing to be able to collaborate. And so, yeah, and my sister, who was the Nick City dancer, she lives in California now. So we only see her, a few times a year. But my sister, Taylor, who lives here very close by with my family in Westchester, we're either shooting or we're making silly TikTok videos, so we're still like dancing with each other.
Yeah. Well, that's great, because I know there was one when you were doing Swan Lake, she had done those photos of you and had gotten one of those photos. And, I always thought it was so great that you guys were together, and you see it on Instagram, like you're saying as well. But I want to go back to when, then you're growing up through the dance studio. And when does it get to the point then for you where you started then to, perhaps did you leave that studio? What were those steps next for you?
Yeah, so I'm so indebted to my first ballet teachers, because of course they first of all, I feel like those really formative years, they gave me such a strong base. They were just such amazing teachers, but they were also amazing because they knew that at some point I might grow out of the studio. And even though the training there was so great, they knew that perhaps other opportunities, laid ahead of me in New York City, let's say. And so instead of trying to keep me, they were like, go off and blossom, which is just, very selfless and very caring and supportive in their own ways. And so I ended up commuting into the city back and forth, 4 or 5 days a week, when one of my teachers from that studio went and opened up her own Valentina Kozlova in New York City. And so then I was going there for private lessons. And and then after that, there was a year that I sort of trained with all different kinds of dancer teachers in the city. I took, even if it was one class, took class with Willie Berman. I took a private from David Howard. I took a private from Ava Edvokimova. I took a private from Gelsey Kirkland. Like, it was just whoever was there. I tried them for Breeze for Roll. And, it's like my mom said to me, because I think you can learn something from everyone, even if it's what you don't like, which is also still really valuable information. And my mom always said to me, listen, like, try this person once. Like, worst case scenario, you never have to take another class with them again. Nothing, it doesn't hurt to try. And I really, that really resonated with me. So I exposed myself to a lot of different teachers for that 1 year. And then I ended up joining ABT school at the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis School. So, so it was a very like organic transition, but I always throughout my entire training from when I decided I wanted to be a ballerina at 8 years old to now at 32 as a professional dancer, always have trained privately on the outside. So that's never changed. But so the coaches have changed.
Yes. Okay. And I think that's really great. So in addition, because that was one of the things I was going to ask you. So in addition to what your daily schedule is with the company, you continue to train on your own and have a coach or coaches on your own for your artistry, for your skill, your technique and everything, which is, I think, is really wonderful. Can you talk about that for us and the listeners?
Absolutely. Yeah. I understand it's a real privilege to be able to train on the outside because you're spending, your own money to do that. You're renting the studio, you're hiring the coach, you are you're investing in yourself. And so, but I do think that if it's kind of great to make that a priority with the resources that one has, because so much extra work can be done when you're one-on-one with a coach. And it's not that we don't have one-on-one time. Let's say at ABT and the company, I'll have a variations rehearsal, but it might only be a half an hour or an hour because, of course, we're a company of 90 dancers with very little time to rehearse and get productions on stage. So for my own personal comfort level, I enjoy having that extra time on my day off to work with my coaches, whoever it might be, and to really refine the things that I want to refine. We also have a lot of time that we're laid off at the ballet company, a lot of off periods. And so I try to continue to stay in shape and to continue to work on future repertoire in that time with my coaches who are still actively working, even when the company is on a layoff.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, and I think that's so important because it is your career. It is, and like you said, you're investing in yourself and your career, and at the level that you are, you want to keep that up and expand your artistic footprint, and develop yourself as an artist. And I say that, I have to say the times I've seen you perform, and it's moving, Skylar. It really, it's so, I remember when I get emotional about it. I mean,
I'm getting emotional.
I always cry at the ballet. I take my and when I see dance, especially dance that moves me, when I had gone to see you in Swan Lake, I think it was your in-person debut, I think, because you had done it online, I believe. I didn't see it online. And it was at Lincoln Center, of course. And I was so excited to go see. And I have to say, Swan Lake is not one of my favorite ballets. But,
nor is that mine.
Well, but and it seemed like everybody was doing it that year too. Like it was back for some reason. And maybe because it was back after COVID. But I remember I sat in that audience and I was transported. And I was stunned. I felt like that is why I go see ballet. And really,
that's very kind of you to say. I feel like the opposite about my Swan Lake performance. I appreciate that.
No, but it's, it's the truth. Like I wouldn't just say it because you're here. My niece who was sitting next to me, she was like, do you need a moment? Because she knows me, like she's used to coming with me. And when I get really quiet or I just need a moment after a performance or at intermission, I'm not one of those people to be like, chatty, chatty, chatty. I'm just like really taking in whatever I've
Yes,
just,
it's with you.
yeah. And maybe it's because, I've been in the business for so long or whoever, or just who I am. It's my makeup. But that particular performance, and it was everything too, it was your performance. It was the orchestration. It was the cast. It was the whole company. It was, it did everything ballet says it's supposed to do. And it was so moving. It made me, like, it confirmed for me, like, why I do what I do and why I've been doing it for so long. And it gave me hope too. It gave me hope of just that dance was going to be okay and come out of COVID okay. And everybody, it just was just an amazing performance. And you specifically, I remember I felt like I was watching two different dancers on stage. Like,
Oh,
I
thank
mean,
you.
no, really, Skylar, and it just was. I felt like, and I know, as a dancer, as a performer, you go back and you look at what you could do better, or this, that, and the other thing. But from my point of view, from an audience member, I was like, I felt like I was watching two completely different dancers dancing those roles, and that's amazing to do, and that just shows your artistry and your commitment and the level at which you dance. So thank you.
Thank you. That's
you
really
know
kind of you to say. I super
yeah.
duper appreciate it.
But it's the truth. And so with saying that, I want to talk about how you train for roles like that, because I do remember at that time, I mean, you still do it, but I just remember specifically at that time, you would be posting, your coaching sessions,
Yes.
and you would also be coaching, you would be watching performances, it looked like you were looking like at old performances, not of yourself, but of other people in the
Yeah.
role. And can you talk about that? Because I just think when I saw you doing that, I was like, this is why this woman dances the way she does. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, please share that.
Yeah. Yeah, the process is it's an interesting one. The way that I've typically worked on most roles is it's like I start by learning choreography, learning musicality, learning steps, building a strong, I would say, technical base, if you will, or figuring out coordination and things like that can be challenging about a role to begin with. And then from there, adding artistic interpretation, which of course is going to be there from the beginning. Obviously, it's like innately I'm going to feel certain things as certain characters or playing particular roles, but um, it's almost like what my coaches say is that they like to build something up and then basically like tear it down. So it's kind of and I think that's in order to enable a certain amount of like freedom within a role, which is I think particularly hard with Swan Lake, because it is so controlled and it's so naked and bare and iconic, and there's just such a specific aesthetic to it that it's hard to let go of concerns, I would say, and shapes and things like that. But that's typically how it works. And then all throughout that time period from beginning to end to even reprising a role, I'm on YouTube watching things for inspiration, studying shapes, like putting things on slow-mo, pausing, taking a screenshot of a position I might really like. So I definitely really get into it. And I think even more so when there's a role that I feel less comfortable with, like Swan Lake, it's a ballet that doesn't resonate with me so much. And so therefore I'm looking for help even more in more places. I'll even go, I remember there was, I don't know, like a short weekend I was in Miami, and I contacted Diana Vishneva and I said, can I come work with you? And then Same thing. I've worked with different people on Swan Lake just because I'm still a little bit grasping at straws with it, and I feel like I'm trying to assimilate information that's going to make it make sense to me, for example. But it is an ongoing. It's a very much an ongoing process. But I think there's like a saying, which is that that basically the first time you ever perform a role is the most important time, because it's like when everything solidifies in the artist and in the body, and it's hard to change it from there or break from it. And so I like when I begin a new role to really invest a lot of time and start maybe even farther in advance than maybe ABT might start to prepare me for such a role, which again, that's where the private coaching comes into play, so that I can really go on stage and know confidently that I'm not forming too many bad habits, I would say. Like I'm really can address everything ahead of time before I go out and do it, so that future performances continue to grow, not now me trying to totally revamp the whole thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that's really interesting to say that. And how about when you're partnering with somebody, because what is that like for you, and how do you approach your partnering work the same way? And then, because then a partner brings in a whole other, a whole other thing, right?
Well, that's what's really interesting. So again, taking Swan Lake as an example, I did make my debut, an online debut, but also it was just a live stream performance with Boca Ballet. Basically over the pandemic, I think it was 2021. It was me and Aaron Bell. We went together to perform with the school/company there, and I of course was working on it as if it was a show at the Met. Doesn't matter where the performance is; it's all going to carry the same weight to me. And Aaron and I were in the studio every day, like 3 hours a day, running things like crazy, and it was great. Like I really got into good shape. I really was again honed in, super focused for these set of shows, and I think it made a big difference. At ABT, I'm oftentimes partnered with Herman Cornejo, who is just the most exquisite human being, gorgeous dancer. I grew up watching him and idolizing him. So now being his partner is a really big honor for me. He's not just such a skilled partner in the mechanics of it, but such a giving one as well. He's super present. He's super accommodating, super selfless. Like I can't say enough beautiful things about Herman. What I will say is that because he is at a particular point in his career, and when I started dancing with him, I was just beginning my, let's say, principal career. We were at very different places. And for him, he's done a lot of these roles 1,000 times. And it's important for him at this point in his life to rehearse in a more moderate manner so that he can preserve his body. And the truth is, he doesn't need to rehearse like crazy. And perhaps when he was young, I don't know because I wasn't his partner back then, but perhaps he was never one to pound things into the ground. And it's not that I need to, let's say, run something every day. It's just that for my psychology, for my mental fortitude, I'm like, okay, I think I want to run Black Swan Pas de Deux every day, all day. Not because I actually need to, but because it makes me mentally feel better. But that's not necessarily everybody's comfort level or everyone's process. And so, again, with someone like Herman, I'm very respectful of the fact that he might not want to push very hard until, let's say, the week before the shows or even like a couple days before the shows. And I really respect that. And I feel comfortable with that because I trust him and he's such an amazing partner and so capable that I don't need to practice with him a lot. It's just I navigate then. Okay, if I want more rehearsal time, maybe I grab a young, hungry guy who's like, would love to perform the role of Siegfried someday and say, hey, can you come and work with me at my private lesson and help me out with like White Swan Pas de Deux so that I can continue to rehearse on my own. But it's really like, and then I basically meet Herman on stage. So it's it depends based on who I'm dancing with. Um, but yeah, so the process can differ.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I mean, thank you for sharing all that because, I don't know if everybody realizes that, that's sometimes how it can happen, that you are rehearsing perhaps not with who you're going to be on stage with up until a certain point, and then, then it's those last moments, that you get to actually have that time. It's almost like dress rehearsal or the studio rehearsal time, and then it's tech week. Right? Then you're on this, right? It's kind of that
Exactly.
same kind of
Yeah.
thing.
And it's really cool because, for example, Erman, he basically doesn't rehearse his variations like at all. Maybe
Mhm.
he does it one or two times, but even like broken up without running it. Maybe he'll do a section
Sure.
here, a section there, mark it. And so always the first time that I watch him do the variation is during the show. And it's like so exciting because I'm standing there in the wing, catching my own breath,
Mhm.
waiting to go on for and I'm like literally mouth agape, seeing how and thinking to myself, how is it that this dancer in his 40s who looks just as amazing as ever, who doesn't rehearse, can go out on stage and throw this stuff in. It's like so spontaneous, so cool. And so
Mhm.
I appreciate those qualities in him. And I feel like as a result, it forces me to be that way in a lot of ways because I'm a control freak. And,
Mhm.
and I think Erman can even see that in me. Like sometimes he can see I get frustrated in rehearsal and he'll come give me a pep talk, which could simply be like, you're amazing. You're great.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like so nice to hear it from him. Again, a person who I really like respect so much, but it's yeah, it's like it's such a privilege to be out there with him and with someone who's so seasoned in those
Yeah.
roles that again I'm debuting them and he's just doing his millionth show of them. So
Yeah. No,
it's
that's nice. And what a great learning curve.
yes,
It's really such a great learning
I can
curve.
take so much from him. Yeah.
Yeah, and I bet he takes from you as well too, and must remind him of something like, oh, I probably should remember that. I would imagine.
Yeah, I think he definitely, between me and Cassandra Trineri, who's
Mhm.
another smaller stature principal at ABT, like between the two of us, I think he's really it's like the rep he's breathing new life into the rep because he's with both of us and we're so like raring to go and it gives him motivation and inspiration and
Yeah,
so I think he enjoys it also. Yeah.
yeah, and since you became principal, so you became principal in what was it, 21 or 22? What?
It was actually September 2020, um,
September 2020.
which
Okay.
was really surprising to me because I didn't know if we were even going to have an ABT after the
Right, right.
it's like it was so
Yeah.
unpredictable. So I certainly didn't anticipate promotions, and it's
Mhm.
certainly not while we were in a period of not working. So it came as a really big surprise to me.
Yeah. And then, so from that moment to now, what has life been like for you as an artist? Just as, what is that like when you become a principal dancer with ABT? How do things change? How do things stay the same?
Yeah, you know what? I think again, because I grew up watching ABT, it's like I can recognize what a big deal it is. And it's a big deal to my 8-year-old self who still lives inside of me,
Yeah.
and so I can really it's like I'm reminded every day how lucky I am to be a principal, but also what a big responsibility it is. And I take that very seriously because I feel that I grew up watching some of the best dancers ever, um, in like early 2000s um, and so I feel that weight, not in a way, not in an uncomfortable way, but in like a positive way that I
Sure.
want to be the best that I can to fill the shoes of those who came before me. But it is like a real luxury because I no longer have to prove myself really to anybody in order to attain this position that now I maintain. Um, and I think like this year I'm realizing it's more that I want to be happy with my own work. I just want to please
Totally.
myself and feel like I'm being as authentic to myself as I can. And it's not again, it's not about making anybody else happy or making anybody else like me because I want to get to this position. It's like, okay, I'm here. And now I think I just need to find my voice because I'm certainly a person who, like, I like being told what to do. I like feedback. I like when I like directness. I like honesty. It's really something I rely on a lot. Maybe almost to a fault, because oftentimes I question myself all the time and I always rely on others to tell me what they feel when they see me. I think that's important in order to get better. But I'm also realizing that in that it's hard, like you could lose yourself or lose or not have as much fun maybe. And I want to start having more fun because I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I feel like now's the time that I can, no matter what anybody says or think, do the things that I'm like, oh, I want to be happy with this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that it shows a lot of maturity in your career, in your how you've grown, because it's probably like the dust has settled, right? Too,
Yes.
so
Yes.
'cause coming out of, the pandemic was a lot. I mean, the dust is still settling from that, with arts organizations, not, let alone the world, right? But that now you're settling more into it and you're finding your way,
Yeah.
okay, now you have some years behind you as a principal dancer. And it's like now that artist, I'm saying this, I'm putting words in your mouth,
Yes.
like the artist, who is the artist, Skylar, that,
Exactly.
yeah. And that's
Yeah.
exciting. I think that's exciting to see and explore.
It is exciting, and it certainly helps to take, again, the pressure off a little bit and give me like a different focus. And I remember there's so many artists who are like so unique, and you go and watch them and you could have 50% of the audience who loves it and 50% who hates it. But really it doesn't matter because it's art and it's just supposed to provoke some sort of feeling. And I remember my coach, Max, he one time said to me, he was like, there's always going to be that 50-50 that, some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it. He's like, but the point is, as long as they're talking about you, then you've done something important, which I think is really, I don't know, poignant.
Yeah. And what are the things is there certain types of movements or ballet or stories that you're drawn to more than others, and what are they?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel more connected, let's say, to a role like Giselle. I actually never saw myself as a Giselle, like growing up. It's not a role that I was like, oh, I'd be great in this ballet. I actually thought the opposite because Adagio was never my strong suit. So I just automatically kind of put myself into a box. I'm a very like realistic person in that I don't, I'm not sitting there saying, oh, every dancer should perform every role, like myself included. So, but through working and through the process, I realized, oh, actually, I'm enjoying this. I connect to it and to the storytelling. A ballet, again, that's harder for me is something like Swan Lake. I don't see myself as a swan because I'm not. There's certain things even physically that I feel limited by in the ballet, but then again, it's like I see people around me who also might not fit the stereotypical mold, but who deliver the most exquisite and moving performances. And I should really pay attention to that and remind myself of those people, because it is possible to be a swan queen even when even when there are things that might not, again, like be your stereotypical swan. So, there's with Swan Lake, I don't connect to it for more reasons other than just me not feeling like I'm super suited to the role. It's not like my favorite story, and it's hard to be part animal, part human. Like I like playing human beings because that I can really like pull from experience. But when you're a swan, it's just sort of it's hard to like understand how much of that duality to play into. I'm like, am I more woman? Am I more swan? Am I, and I've had it explained to me 1,000 times by 1,000 different people, but it's still doesn't always connect.
Yeah.
Again, adagio, like White Swan Pas de Deux, is not, I don't have legs that go up to my ears. It's just certain things. It's very naked. And even musically, sometimes it's not like my favorite Tchaikovsky music.
Okay.
It's just, there are elements to it. It was not even my favorite to watch growing up. So, I'm still finding my way, but from what I understand, this is not an uncommon struggle that ballerinas experience with such an iconic ballet. It's one that, as my coach has said, it's like you're a student forever and you're going to be unhappy with your swan lake forever until the day you retire it. Like, it's it's one of those, it's unforgiving.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite ballet or a favorite role that you want to portray?
Oh, I'd love to do Romeo and Juliet. I've been understudying the role for a few years now. I thought I tried to fight for the opportunity to do it this past Met season, which did not come to fruition, which was really disappointing to me. I understood why, there were certain factors that were in place other than just like, oh no, we don't want you to do it. It wasn't really that, but I do think it would have been possible, but it didn't work out. And so that was upsetting, but at least I vouched for myself, which is something that I also learned to do in the last few years, is use my voice to self-advocate. So that's like my next dream role. But honestly, like ballets, again, storytelling ballets like Onegin, Manon, Lady of the Camellias, I mean, they're all the human emotions really appeal to me.
Yeah. So how about Firebird? I love Firebird, I have to say.
Firebird, you know what?
Love
Yes,
it.
I did perform in Alexei Ratmansky's Firebird, and I loved it. I was not the Firebird, I was the lead maiden. But honestly, I would have preferred to be the lead maiden because, again, it's very hard to be an animal on stage. Yes, it takes so much extra energy and like you have to contort your body into different ways. I mean, I did another Ratmansky ballet called The Golden Cockerel, in which I was like a golden mechanical chicken. And I swear it was like one of the hardest roles I'd ever done. And I barely had any entrances, but the entrances that I did have, the segments that I had, little variations, were so exhausting. I mean, I thought, because the sharpness of the movement and it's just hard to morph into an animal, like no matter probably what it is, but especially, let's say, a Firebird that has so much energy and, it's exhausting. And also there's not much when you are portraying something that's not human on stage. It's harder to have the undertones of motivation to do it because there's not like, oh, I'm here telling a story that is relatable and really makes sense and that feels, again, very human. It's like there's nothing else but the movement. It feels more abstract, and so therefore it's harder to get on board. Exactly. Yeah.
So, have you ever taken, because my background too is modern. I performed with a modern company for a long time, and modern is great stuff. Modern really gets you into that whole otherworldliness of things. Have you ever so that brings me to my other question is, do you take other classes when you're not working? Do you try other forms of dance? I know you said when you were little you did some other things, but do you try your hand at other things and
yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite ways to, like, I would say, quote, cross train, because it's sometimes, again, no matter how many hours you might put in a studio, it might not be enough for your stamina. And so I'll often go to, let's say, like Perry dance, which is right down by ABT, and I'll take a hip hop class or a shuffling class or an African dance class, or I took my first like locking class last year. I mean, I'm very open to other styles of dance. I really love it. Pole classes, like whatever it is, I enjoy moving in different ways for sure. And I respect it. Like, even growing up, part of our curriculum at the JKO school was character and modern and jazz. And I think it's so important. Like to be able to, it makes you a more versatile dancer for sure.
Yeah, especially now too. I think with, so many ballet companies now are bringing so much more contemporary onto the repertoire, that I think it just it gives you a wider range, like you're
Yes.
saying, it's
Yes.
like,
And it makes it so that when, like, I mean, if I were to say anything to, to young dancers, I would definitely encourage that. It's like, don't brush those classes off, because then when you get older and choreographers come into work with a company, they might pick the people that they see. They might pluck you
yeah,
straight out of the corps de ballet, and
yeah,
because they see a certain movement quality in you. So I think it's so valuable in today's day and age. I completely agree.
yeah, yeah. Do you, do you find yourself, now that you do have this position as a principal dancer, do you find yourself wanting to teach more? I know you were doing some during the pandemic. Or you don't have the time, or what's that like for you?
Yeah, I love teaching. I still love it, and I actually teach every week.
Oh,
I teach private lessons every
nice.
week. I have some. It's actually so wild to think about. It's like I've known some of the same kids for 5 years now since the
Wow.
pandemic, and
Mhm.
I've sort of watched them go from, let's say, like a 10-year-old to now like a 15-year-old. It's like I've
Wow.
been
Yeah.
a part of, which is so surreal, and so special to like watch these kids kind of grow up in front of my eyes, and to think, oh wow, 5 years ago we started doing Zoom lessons,
Yeah.
and now I'm seeing them in person in the city and
Mhm.
whatever. But I do have week kids that I work with weekly, and it's it's wonderful. It's something I definitely want to do more of. Even when I retire, I would love to be a coach. I would love to
Yeah.
do what my coaches are doing, and
Mhm.
try to help and pass along whatever knowledge I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And that those avenues come, I think, just like your career was organic up to this point, I'm sure that'll be there in the future as well.
Yeah, I
You
hope
know,
so.
yeah. Do you have any like causes that you support, that you lend your voice to, and what are those? Like what's near and
Yeah.
dear to your heart?
I mean, I've always been an advocate for animals.
Oh,
Like I've always, just even on my own, like privately, I've always kind of supported animal
mhm.
organizations and charities. I think I I very rarely like speak out on topics or things like that on social media, let's
Mhm.
say. I don't typically use my platforms to advocate for things, just because I like to kind of leave my account for ballet sort of
Mhm.
exclusively.
Yeah.
I did feel compelled, for example, when October 7th happened, just because I'm a Jewish person. And I just felt it was so sad to see like a terrorist attack of that
Mhm.
magnitude. And also because my godfather, he actually just, like, I don't know, 3, 4 days ago, just passed away. He
Oh,
was
I'm sorry.
almost, that's okay.
Oh,
Thank you. He was almost 98 years old, but he was a
wow.
Holocaust survivor. And so, it felt particularly like personal to me. Just
Mhm. Yeah.
um peace for everyone. I
Yeah.
mean, Jews,
Yeah.
Palestinians, America, and like
Yeah.
all across the board. That was an instance in which I was doing more. And also for kids, I taught some classes for kids in Israel at the time who were sheltering at home and were not able to like leave their homes. They were
Mhm.
sort of, it was kind of like being in back in a pandemic for them. So I taught them some classes, just
Oh,
volunteered so that they could continue to like move inside.
yeah.
But yeah, so I think those, but typically I'm at the causes that I support are kind of like closer to home, I would say.
Yeah. No, I was just curious. And I
Yeah.
think I think it's interesting too. And I remember, some of your posts during, when October 7th happened too.
Yeah.
And it's just like, there's certain things that we can't help but comment on,
Yeah.
right?
It's true.
Yeah. And like, even myself, like I don't post a lot of stuff. I try to keep it business oriented, my pages and the podcast too. But there's just certain things that will cause a reaction, like a human reaction to something. Yeah.
Exactly.
I
Or
work,
like,
go ahead.
yeah. Or even like when the war with Ukraine kind
Ukraine.
of was
Yeah.
happening. Like, for example, I think we sent like, I don't know, 7 suitcases worth of clothes. Like because there were a lot of actually ballet dancers there who were displaced and actually moving to other places and countries and ballet schools and didn't have and just arrived at their new conservatory with just a backpack. And so I sent like the leotards and tights of mine. And so, yeah, but it's usually, it's not like I tell everybody, oh, I'm doing this
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah. I remember there was one post. It was at, I don't remember what year it was. It was a couple years ago. It was at Hanukkah, and you were lighting the menorah it was in your window. And I
Yeah.
remember that was so beautiful. I just thought
Yeah.
that was so moving. And I was just like, oh, it was nice to see that and experience that,
Oh,
so
thank you. Well, and
yeah.
I've received so many positive messages from people all around the place, who I know it means a lot. I don't post for the purpose of other people, but
Yeah.
when they do tell me that, oh, it means so much, like to see you sharing this thing, that you're lighting your menorah. It makes us feel good that you're not afraid of like sharing that you're doing that. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that can inspire hope in others. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I think it, makes people feel connected. We all feel
Yeah.
connected somehow. Um,
True.
and so you're getting ready for your upcoming season or performances in Washington, correct? Right?
Exactly. Yes.
Well,
We have a few tours coming up.
you want to talk about those for a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. We're about to perform Crime and Punishment in DC at the Kennedy Center. I'm very excited to revisit that role. Again, another very human role. I hadn't read Crime and Punishment in school or anything, so I
Me neither.
decided to, yeah, so I decided to pick up a copy over the summer before we started the process and read it, and I thought it was a great book. And so enjoy again portraying the role of a girl who's being prostituted by her father, who's destitute and is very religious, like literally everything that I'm not. I'm actually not very religious at all. I'm certainly not a prostitute, and my dad is great. So so I love to be able to tackle those kinds of stories that are so foreign, but again, like you can find something from within to help tell the story and make it feel believable. And then after that, we go to Orange County to premiere Christopher Wheeldon's A Winter's Tale, which we're actually learning right now. It's in our rehearsal process. We are just tackling it. And I will play the role of Perdita, which it's a beautiful, beautiful role. I mean, Chris's choreography is always very special to dance, like makes you feel beautiful and chic and special. So I'll be excited to see how that all comes together. I watched the ballet briefly, like bits and pieces of it on Medici TV, just to kind of get a sense. I hadn't seen it before, but I think, I just love ABT's artists, and I'm excited to see what we do with the story. And then after that, we go to Korea.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we perform a lot of the repertoire that we did in the fall, including In the Upper Room, a new work by Gemma Bond, a new work by Kyle Abraham. We're doing theme and variations there. I think we have a gala show there. So we have a little bit to do before that season.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. Lots going on, which is great. That's
Yeah.
really, really good. Well, Skylar, is there anything, you want to leave the listeners with? This has been a great conversation. Time always goes so fast, when I'm
Thank
talking to
you.
somebody. Yeah. Is there anything you want to, any words of wisdom you can leave the listeners with?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, whenever I'm asked that question, I always come back to the same thing, which I think has held true for me throughout all of my years dancing or really doing anything, even stuff on the outside. If I am feeling really entrepreneurial and I want to do X, Y, or Z, it's like I realize that it really feels like everything is possible just through honest hard work. I think it's such an important quality to have. And it's certainly not always easy. I mean, there's so many days where I wake up and I'm like, I really don't feel like going to work right now. I don't want to rehearse. I'm not in the mood. Um, but every time, you show up with openness and intention and I think we just improve a little bit more every day, and all of those days really can add up to something. And it's important to be aware of our weaknesses, but also our strengths, and just to continue to be humble um, and in striving for greatness, putting in the work. It's like it doesn't happen for everyone easily, and so therefore I think, and even for those where it does happen easily, and there's certain people who just have things handed to them, let's say on a silver platter, I think it's still so important to always work hard. So that's my
Yeah,
thing.
no, I think it's great. Work hard. That's what the bottom line is,
Yeah.
to really work hard. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's
Thank
really been
you.
wonderful. You're welcome to speak with you. And thank you, listeners. Thank you for joining us today on Dance Talk with Joanne Carey. Follow us, like us, and share, share, share. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Powered by Riverside.